This visual novel is a work of horror fiction intended for adult audiences only. Some of the scenes featured here may be considered unsettling or cruel. Content warning, a bunch of stuff that I couldn't get through in time, so pause it and go back if you want the content warning, I guess. Reading stuff out loud is hard. So this is All Under Control. It's by Jimmy the Floof, who I did one of the early readings for the story once the first draft was done, all the way back in November, which was originally being set up for and didn't pan out, but now it's out and is immediately a very solid title screen. I've commissioned Jimmy multiple times in the past already, and also he did the merch. He did my merch design for my one shirt I have so far, which I should probably do more, but I should also probably gain more audience before I bother with merch again, because blah blah blah. So having already read this, or at least a version of this, I definitely know that we can't cover the entirety of it. I have a particular end point where I think I'll stop, and it becomes not reasonable for YouTube to proceed, and so that'll be your point to decide whether or not you want to upset yourself with the full thing. 1. A night fright. There's a screen. I wasn't sure when if the sounds were over or not. He looked weird the entire time. I don't usually let it get to me. Definitely not when I didn't have high hopes for sex to begin with. But I guess at times, the fruit of too much expectation turns out bitter enough to spoil my whole night. Guess I can be that petty. But I don't care to admit it. The heat went down. We just lay there, with nothing to do besides showing each other all the dumb jokes we could find through our phones. And unsurprisingly, nothing got a chuckle out of him. That was when I went to the bathroom for my meds, while he set up his CPAP machine. I thought it must have been anxiety, which mixed with mood regulators could often be a loaded shot straight through my sexual excitement. That meant none of us were to blame for the awkwardness of it all, simple as that. We tried. It was still fun, and even if neither of us got off. But I couldn't get his expression out of my head. Despite my efforts, I didn't think he liked it very much. Maybe not at all. I swallowed my tabs dry, then I gave him another look as I walked out of the bathroom. Alex was already asleep. The big, shirtless polar bear, soft as a dream, wearing a black sleep mask atop the oxygen one strapped to his muzzle. Sleep mask and the oxygen mask is the language, yeah. I had known him for a while, but it took months for our schedules to align to hang out tonight. I didn't go out much. And judging from my previous conversations, neither did he. We shared dinner next to a pile of folded clothes he didn't bother putting away. We watched YouTube on a smart TV he didn't bother turning off. We tried to have sex on a bed he didn't bother preparing. And we used months-old lube he didn't even bother ripping the seal off of. I wasn't judging him. Rather, I was just trying to look for a root cause. I guess one could consider it selfish to only think about someone else's troubles when insecurity hits. But really, cast the first stone, they who never second-guessed themselves when they started to know someone. We weren't close friends, after all. Not yet, at least. And I guess, at the time, I was more of an observer than a friend. More curious than worried. Even at late night, with only a timid coat of outside lighting peeking in, the apartment itself felt cozy enough. With my eyes adjusted to the dark, I could see the bare minimum of where things were, including all the messy parts. I turned my head and to a corner where the bookshelves, I think "and" is supposed to not be there, is it right? Okay. I turned my head to a corner where the bookshelves, stacked full of PS4 games, thick fantasy novels, and Funko Pops, met with the glass sliding doors to the balcony. It was just a corner, perfectly unremarkable in how its angles fit together. And yet, it was that same corner he was looking at for most of the night, like he was expecting it to unfold before us. There wasn't even any piece of decoration on it. It was as bare and ordinary as it gets. I strained my vision, then approached it to touch the walls. Nothing special at all. Whatever he saw there, I wasn't seeing. So, I went back to bed and cuddled close to him. Didn't take long for me to fall asleep. Then, maybe a couple of hours or a couple of minutes later, he woke me up with a paralyzing scream. His paws went up to his face to cover his eyes. To me, in the dark, it briefly looked as if he was forcing his wrists into his eye sockets. How you doing? I wasn't about to make a big deal out of it if he wasn't. After about 10 a.m. or so, we both went to the living room for some tentative breakfast plans. He brewed some coffee for us both, then we went to the bathroom to take care of the worst hangover face I'd ever seen in anyone. I'm really sorry about that. He said it as he walked out of the bathroom, wiping his cheeks in the spots where the eye drops had missed his eyes. Night terrors suck ass, Tiago. I've had them since high school. I shrugged. I was just surprised to see such a frightened bear. And you call yourself an apex predator. He didn't laugh. Instead, I watched him walk to the kitchen to warm up the leftover bacon pizza in the microwave, barely giving me a glance as he went on. I've just been getting them a bit more recently. I, had a few things happen. I nodded and let the air speak to me. Let the air speak for me. Just like I thought last night. There was baggage to unpack. I thought that maybe I should have declined his invitation to come over. But fuck. We had been trying to hang out for so long. Didn't he feel somewhat pressured this time? Or did he feel somewhat pressured this time? I couldn't linger on that idea for long. The microwave beeped, and he caught me looking. He tried to smile. Then he put his plate on the table, and his eyes went somewhere else entirely. Another corner, closer to the dinner table this time, but just as empty as the one from last night. I looked at him for a while until I realized he wasn't blinking. What's up with that? He almost jumped at the sound of my voice. His bulging eyes, slightly pinkish, took me back a half a step. Then his face dropped, and his next attempt at a reassuring smile did a poor job at masking it. That's quite a face, honestly. Uh-huh, yep. This is my normal face. This is my acting normal face. It's more like a grin carved out of Play-Doh. Wrong in all the subtle ways. My mind's been all over the place. A tough nightmare will do that for you. I get it, really. How do you draw? How the fuck do you draw like this? I fixated on Jimmy's art a few times because I'm like, the line art is so good, but it's like, specifically the fact that he can blend He has the line art, and then he has the hatching, and then he has the really solid heavy blacks for shadows, but then he also still does shading. And trying to do all those things, whenever I try to mix some of these things, it's really a struggle. I can do hatching and heavy black, but then once I try to add shading, it always looks weird. Admittedly, it's like you don't know what the balance looks like until you've finished it, and you can look at it all at once. So once you start adding elements to it while you're doing it, it looks wrong, because you don't know what it's going to look like overall once you've actually done it everywhere. I don't know. I look at this stuff a lot. He shook his head. Really? It's that simple? I don't know, man. I can be pretty complicated sometimes. He chuckled lightly. This time it did sound a little bit more genuine. I thought you even liked complicated guys. I slouched back on the couch, lightly sipping on my coffee. It had gotten cold way too fast. Look, about last night. I just wanted you to know that I loved spending time with you. I really did. Oh, forget about that shit, bro. We all get nervous sometimes. Don't worry. It's not that. And it's not your fault. Not yours either. He sighed, nodding hastily. Right. It's just... Alex raised his paw as if to ask for time. He got up and covered his plate with the plastic dome, then turned to the empty corner again. This time, what I saw in him wasn't just a momentary fright. There really was some visible affliction coursing through him from head to toe. I could smell fear shaking his body. It continued until he approached me on the couch. I really need to talk to you about something. To me specifically? I don't know who else I could talk to. He said it awkwardly. The bear had his paws on his knees. They were still shaking. You know, I moved here right when the whole pandemic hit. I was never really good at making friends. And well, I did meet some other people through all this time. I kinda wish I hadn't. Really wish I hadn't. And right now, you're pretty much the only one I'm comfortable with. He was throwing words at me faster than I could process. I retracted to the other side of the couch and his ears flattened. I'm sorry, I just... Hey, it's fine, really. Look, whatever you're dealing with right now, if you think it'll help you, you can just talk to me, okay? Right. But the thing is, I don't know if I really should share. He said that, then turned back to that same corner he was staring at. And once again I saw his body language change. Alex, what are you looking at? The bear turned back toward me. His glare was not only cold, but a total blizzard. This is gonna be a long story. Sure you want to hear? I wasn't. But if I was willing to be more of a friend than an observer, and if I was still interested in maybe something else, at the time I think that was the case, then I had to go on with it. It's not like he would expect me to give advice anyway. I know sometimes it's good to just have someone to talk to. Right now, in hindsight, with the events that followed, I wish I had just run away the moment he asked. But we'll get to that later. Stay here, and everything will be clear soon. But man, how I wish I had never stayed. Where do we start? Where do we start? Well, first I need to tell you about a couple of friends. Thomas and Diego. Hello. Where do we start? Well, first I need to tell you about a couple of friends. So I actually already knew someone living in São Paulo before I decided to come here. A gray wolf I had known since high school, who had moved here as a musician. It was funny, looking back at how me and Thomas met. Back then I played drums in the school band, and we would sometimes just go to each other's houses for some games and music talk. I had this dream of playing in a rock band, and he wasn't half bad with the guitar. Years passed, and while I was the one who ended up working for a boring graphic design degree, he somehow managed to become a relatively successful musician on his own. So when I was applying to study here, I thought, at least I already have someone to hang out with. We were both excited at the prospect. Adding to that, around that time I'd already learned a great deal about myself and my sexuality. I wasn't the least bit scared coming out to him. In fact, I couldn't have hoped for a more positive outcome, since right afterwards he came out to me as bi. We didn't have feelings for each other besides friendship though, and that was fine. As a whole, it still felt like we had become closer than we ever had been. But then, he said he was seeing someone. I was instantly curious regarding the lucky person. They were a man, and to my surprise also a bear. Though black, not polar. The two of them were, at the time, taking steps to move into an apartment at Ligotti, which got me into some mixed feelings. I love where I live, but Interlagos was far too away from the most interesting parts of São Paulo, if you ask me. With no subway access to boot. Still, he assured me that we would still talk regularly, even if he couldn't hang out often. And look, one thing I need to say outright is that Thomas liked to talk. A lot. To the point that even if we weren't even sexually interested in each other, he had no shame in oversharing. A couple of drinks in, he'd start to openly talk and tease about sex and kinks. Ever since we were teenagers, it was just something that he did often. Maybe way too often, but I don't mean to say that I found him annoying because of that. In fact, I actually had fun with that kind of thing. It didn't take long for me to join the horny talk myself. Hell, we even traded tips on sex toys, gay sex, preparing before bottoming, what lube to use, and all that stuff. So when he brought up the subject of a hypnosis kink, that didn't raise any flags at all to me. Honestly, it even sounded a tad funny. He was the last person I'd ever suggest was into completely submitting himself. Thomas said he and his boyfriend, said his name was Diego, had quickly become obsessed with it. He admitted that he did feel silly at first, as a skeptic of mind control techniques. So when Diego swung a small pocket watch in front of him and read his script, he just played pretend until they were both excited enough they wouldn't have to kid themselves anymore. Meanwhile, I listened with a measured deal of interest. And you know how it is. When a friend you love is genuinely into something, even if you're only tangentially there for what he's talking about, it is exciting just to hear. If a friend's joy radiates with glimmer, then his joy was a powerful lighthouse. It's so fucking hot. Diego's a raw talent as hypnotizer. Doesn't even feel like I'm pretending. Sure, it's easy to leave the trance when we have to. But it's all about that in-the-moment feel, you get me? And I'd say, Yeah. Hell, you're almost getting me sold on trying it out myself. And he chuckled. Come visit sometime, Alex. Diego will make you do the dishes for us. Naked, while we sit back and watch. But plans to visit him for a test hypnosis session never really left our text logs or night outs. You know what happened. It was early 2020, and by April there were already lockdown attempts in most of Brazil. Sao Paulo got it fucking bad, and since I have a history of immunocompromised people in the family, I didn't want to risk catching the damn thing. So every interaction with me and Thomas around that time remained through text and voice call only. He would tell me about shows and games that were coming out, how he and Diego were working together on some music, and how he didn't have to worry much about money because his partner worked at home as professor. And of course, he kept telling me how the hypnosis was going. To the point where I actually felt my body... There was a point where I actually felt my body moving on its own. Jerking him off. Wanting so bad to lick the tip, but knowing I couldn't do it until he told me. And I was like, does he make you purr like a cat when he snaps his fingers? Make you sleep on the count of 3? Then a series of laughing emojis later, he responded, I'm not that far gone, trust me. But you know, I still think it'd be hotter if there wasn't really a way of fighting back. Seeing my body moving, doing things I'd be too scared to try? Fuck, it's just having a good time with barely any effort. Then I said, I can see the appeal of that. Is he really that good? You bet. Last night he showed me the websites he goes to for hypnosis enthusiasts. Lots of very helpful tips there. Voice intonation, how to write your own prompts, book recommendations, professional courses, how to set the mood. Then I sent something like, just be careful not to give them your bank account info. Surely they can't hypnotize you to do that. Reference to an actual event. I don't remember if that was just purely a joke or if it was a thing that supposedly happened, but there was definitely like the claim on Twitter that somebody was tricking hypnosis kink people into opening their bank accounts to them. It definitely sounds like an absurd joke. To which he responded in complete dismissal, which I totally expected. Yeah, daddy, don't worry, we'll behave, X3. I teased him for calling me that, and we both dropped the subject as we kept teasing back and forth until we went back to bed. In honesty, I was still happy for him. But after a while, things began to slow down. He would still eventually send a text or two after an intense session with his boyfriend, but our subjects frequently deviated to somewhere else, and the conversation would die on the spot. It stayed like this until more or less the first third of 2021. That's when you and I began to talk, I think. And the lockdown policies were getting less severe, although I was still too anxious to go out. Stuff was getting a bit calmer in the country. COVID stress shrunk so that political stress could grow, with the president spitting atrocities on live TV. I was also starting to get used to how my life was going in the city. I got my graphics design degree. And back then, I've been getting enough as a freelance illustrator to keep this gay little apartment for myself for a while. Then sometime later, after 2 months of silence, I woke up to a text from Thomas. I didn't realize it had been that long since we last talked. Couple that with the fact that I was always someone who dreaded random texts out of the blue. I was feeling a bit scared. I had this gut feeling, you know, like something was terribly wrong. Some kind of tragedy, as if his mom suddenly got terribly sick or some friend passed away. Or perhaps it could be that he had broken up with his bear and was down both emotionally and financially. It felt silly, jumping to conclusions like that. After all, he could have just sent something like, "Hey, how's it going, big guy? It's been a while," or something like that. Nervous as I was, I could only gather enough courage in me to actually check the message until it was nighttime, still expecting some bad shit. And yeah, I guess I was wrong. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't just bad. It was way, way worse. Alex paused, and I watched him turn to the kitchen. I'm from Rio de Janeiro, which is a city I was bound to leave behind at a certain point in my life, given my disdain for both the sea and summer heat. But São Paulo is, as my mom would say, the city of drizzle. The real tipping point that got me to move in was how cozy it felt during winter. Now, while the bear took a break for a glass of water and a couple more eye drops, I felt myself freezing to the goddamn spine. The sky from the balcony window was sickly pale, like a uniform sheet of gray covering the whole city. Alex hadn't been blinking much during the story. He knew that I noticed that. At the end of most sentences, he shut his eyes in obvious agony, wincing and baring his teeth. They were yellowish and thinned out on the irritated gums. He wasn't doing well at all mentally. That I already knew. What I didn't really expect was the places his story was going. When he came back with the water, just briefly glancing at the lonely slice of pizza he had heated a few minutes back, he seemed eager to continue. As it turned out, this wasn't just a vent, but a necessity. A compulsion to get the rest of his statement out there. I could do nothing but listen. Every word he uttered carved in the back of my skull so I would never forget. I already told you I felt uneasy when the notification popped up. And when I saw it was an audio track, it was like a key turned inside me. I thought, okay, this is definitely serious. I sat on the couch, made sure I was free of absolutely any other chores, and pressed play. Now, before I keep going, I need to reassure you. Everything I've been telling you is the truth. I'm not making any of this up. I still have the audio saved, and I can forward it to you later if you want, but I'd really rather not. There's something wrong with it, and well, I could only form guesses as to what specifically after I went to his apartment. Alex sighed with deep regret. But now it's not the time. We'll get to that later. Hell, we need to. Now the audio, it went something like... Oh. I missed some of the transition. How you doing, buddy? He stood still for a moment. Then something seemed to shift within him. Alex assumed a completely different voice from his own. It was raspy, drawled, and deep. A throat worn out from too many cigarettes and too little time, and which had known no true rest for way too long. Even his body language seemed to transform as he assumed a slightly contorted posture in his back. His eyes were no longer at me, nor at any corner of the apartment, but looked directly through me to a point beyond space itself. Then he started. Hey, big guy. I know it's been a while since we last talked. Crazy times these days, eh? He laughed, the noise of a morbid ghoul. I wish I could tell you things were fine, but they're really not. Fucking far from it. You won't even believe it, and I don't even know how to start. I'm dropping the bomb right now. Diego is gone. Not like he abandoned me or we broke up kind of way. He's dead. Dead. Plain and simple. And as to how, well, he was into something bad. Something dark. His voice cracked as his breathing became heavier. I need you to come. Please. I need to talk to someone. I can't do this through the phone, it's just so much. Way too much for me to handle on my own. Please. I'll be waiting for a response. Please don't leave me. He was shaking when he finished. At some point in the middle of his retelling, Alex almost started to cry. Back then, I guessed it was justifiable for him to feel that way, but I couldn't shake that it was still part of some kind of act. It didn't feel right at all. It was making me feel uncomfortable, but I couldn't simply tell him to stop. Something had irrevocably captivated me beyond objections. Then, when the act was over, it was as if a shadow had lifted from the entire room. He went back to himself, staring at me with those terrified, unblinking eyes. Sorry, I need a moment. I just nodded. He got up for some more water, and then sat at the table next to his cold food, silverware clinking loudly when he cut the slice of pizza into smaller bits. I sat next to him. The first shock to me was his voice. It sounded tired, yes, but that was not everything. I don't know how to describe it in any other way, but I swear I could hear some kind of whisper between every pause, between every word. Like there was someone else talking. It wasn't just an impression either. It was knitted. At first, I thought I could have been the TV. But that would still sound somewhat distorted, wouldn't it? And there's more. Whatever the other voice was speaking, it wasn't Portuguese. It wasn't English. It wasn't like any language I ever heard. And yet deep in my head, I can almost understand the intent behind it, being directly transferred to my subconscious. Like thoughts forming in my brain without me even having the effort to think them. Like hypnosis. I felt a compulsion inside my mind. Thomas was calling me to his home. How could I refuse it? It was impossible. I didn't even send a text. I decided to visit him the very next morning. Now, first of all, I already mentioned how unsettling Alex's reenactment felt to me, but there was another layer to it which I felt like truly elevated it. This could just be me misremembering things or posterior events reshaping them in hindsight. But as he was speaking, I remember noticing some kind of whispering between his words as well. I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't about to start theorizing right away. As soon as it was over, I felt a wave of nausea spreading through my body, then a slight headache, and then nothing else. Alex continued his story. I didn't even send a text. I decided to visit him the very next morning. What I'm about to tell you is both a recollection of everything I saw that day and a few more details I only learned about during the time that followed. I'll try to be brief, because after I got there, we literally spent an entire afternoon just talking. Sometimes over repeated topics, and other times over stuff I never really managed to make much sense of. Now, you already know I don't like going out much. Besides COVID anxiety, the distance from the rest of the city always felt discouraging in many ways. I also never got into got to learn bus routes, and since I earned enough anyway, an Uber every now and then never hurt. I always wished I had made more effort to visit friends more often after I got vaccinated, but like that Los Hermanos song says, leaving home is already going on an adventure. But my brain wouldn't let that cursed itch go away. It spoke louder than anything else, and while normally I'd welcome any reason to leave my apartment, this time it felt like I was walking into an early grave. Like my survival instinct was screaming, and I was momentarily deaf to it. Nothing would stop me. Thomas's apartment complex was beautiful, small, and filled with gardens and hedges around a couple of gazebos from Greco-Roman art style. I stared at them at the reception while the guard at the lookout phoned the wolf. During the Uber ride, I had passed by my shopping mall just a few blocks away, followed by a family-owned French restaurant and a small cafe and bookstore around the corner. Then I looked outside and noticed a little pharmacy and convenience store just a few paces across the sidewalk. That was a cozy location, and when they let me in, I took my time just looking around the complex. I always felt a bit class-conscious when visiting such places. I didn't know how much Diego made a month, but if he could afford a place like that, I think he and Thomas were living a dream. The furry exit sign. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary, even after I got to his floor. This looks like a conservative scaremongering piece almost. The scary red warning light at the base, and then at the base of the door is a pride flag. What's that one? I don't know. I'm trying to read the other one. It's all in Portuguese, so I'm not going to be able to get it. Walking into the hallway, there was the scent of someone's mid-afternoon coffee from one of the rooms. Then the muffled beats of music from another one, like Anna Carolina, singing about how much she likes roses. And then some muffled action movie sounds from the other one, from another one right after. Why was I so afraid there'd be anything unusual? Even if the audio had creeped me out a bit, it looked like this was going to be just another visit. We'd sit down, vent for a while, watch something, order a burger, then I'd sleep on the couch just to keep him company overnight. There's spooky spirals on the floor. Okay, the whole floor is spirals, yeah. My Uzumaki sense is tingling. But then I got to his door, and all my expectations shattered. Like a prick on the back of the neck, or a sudden chill you're only supposed to feel in moments near death. There was an aura of uncanny foulness beyond that door, even if it looked barely discernible from all others. Thomas didn't like decorating it much besides the Pride welcome rug, but there are some things that seem to go beyond what they look like. Our eyes cannot see it, but something else inside us can feel its presence and its repulsiveness. I just recognize the fact that they have a bathroom that's outside their apartment. Like, do they have a shared restroom on the floor? I turned the knob. I knew I was coming. He knew I was coming, so the door hadn't been locked. The little... what a wild visual. Just an upsetting, obliterated apartment, absolute nightmare about everything about it. And then right in the middle, just a little smiley mug facing us. It's just very funny. It's the first thing I latched onto, is the dissonance of the tone of everything and then that cup. When I walked in, a warm cloud of rot and decay was the first thing to greet me. It was too dark, and way too cold for a wolf. The dishes and cups piled in the sink like a porcelain castle, and so did the dirty clothes on top of the dining table. The walls appeared to sweat out a dark, gooey substance. And the smell, God, the smell. I could feel the filth in the air. It felt heavy to walk in there, like a dull knife slicing through burnt steak. Like straining to see in the dark. It was a warning. One I should have listened to before I noticed Thomas's frail figure emerging from his bedroom. Damn. He's not good. No. Patches and bandages, not exposed bones, but like boniness. He's wearing a blindfold? Jeez. Jimmy's art goes so fucking hard. Also, I took a moment to take a drink. Scars are still visible. Bear? He murmured. I couldn't see more than a blurry shape in the dark, but it was obvious he was trembling, leaning against the wall with barely any strength on his legs. I'm sorry for calling you, I really am. I shivered. Thomas, what is all this? He didn't respond right away, and during that silence I heard that weird thing again. Whispers, coming from nowhere that I could trace. You better sit. We're gonna be here for a while. I'm sorry I can't offer anything to drink. I know you love coffee as much as I do. Or did. Oh, Alex. I couldn't go for a day without at least 2 cups. But now it's been so long, I don't even remember the taste. He chuckled at that. It was a drawled, terminal kind of chuckle, of rusty vocal cords. I sat at the dinner table, on the only chair I could see that didn't have anything on it, be it clothes or paper wraps or from takeout orders. Then he left his spot, and my eyes adjusted just well enough that I could see him. Well, how could I even put it? At that moment I remembered the phrase, thinner than death, came on a whim and stuck with me. I saw his skin stretching over his bones, fur seemed to have fallen from most of his torso, while a bunch of scars decorated from side to side. His face didn't seem to be much better. The unkempt tufts along his jawline pointed in all directions, and both his ears had been nicked at the base. His left ear in specific was missing a good chunk from the tip. Fucking hell, I thought, feeling as if in front of a car wreck. Had Diego had done all that to him? If so, I didn't have any idea until that day. Then I noticed his eyes. Or rather, I noticed that I couldn't find them. It's usually so easy to see a wolf's eyes in the dark, due to how much they reflect, but his were covered under a sleep mask. It only started a few months ago. I guess you could say we got a bit too excited with some things. You must have noticed at some point I stopped messaging you about it. It's not because I suddenly got shy or thought I was bothering you. Things really got out of control. And then he told me everything, very slowly, like he'd been rehearsing all of this for a while. I think it took him more than an hour to finish it, but at the time, it felt like just a few minutes. I understood why he had to take his time. Some horrors, especially the ones that dig deep inside you, require patience. You need to dissect them in order to rip off the roots and repair those rotten foundations. It's like surgery of the mind. Thomas and Diego were into hypnosis. For a long time, I assumed it was just play pretend on both parts. You couldn't actually make someone do things they'd never do, right? But at a certain point, Thomas told me he really wanted to test that limit for a change. Paradoxical, right? Willing himself to do things unwillingly. I didn't think it would work. Oh, this is him talking. I didn't think it would work, and at first it really didn't. At least, not as well as he had hoped. To give one example, if Diego was into water sports, Thomas was not. Wait. Okay, no, I am wrong about who was talking. One night, Thomas wanted Diego to hypnotize him into drinking his own piss, which only resulted in the wolf vomiting all over the floor just seconds during the trance. That went on to other kinks he said he wouldn't even try, and others that neither of them were into. It was like a test of how far they could push the fantasy. Of course, though, Diego would sometimes try to push back. This isn't what hypnosis is about, he'd say, to absolutely no avail. Thomas wouldn't give up. They both kept going to more extremes, looking here and there for different methods of induction. Then something changed. Hi. How you doing, Diego? Uh-huh. Alright. Smilebear.jpg. Something sinister had invited itself into their play, and much to their dismay, would give them exactly what they'd been seeking. One night, Thomas saw that Diego had pulled an all-nighter on his computer. He never did that. A man's commitment to his schedule is the golden badge of a passionate soul, he would sometimes remark. Thomas saw him bathed in the blue light of his monitor, eyes wide open, grinning to himself. When the bear noticed he was being watched, he closed the window he was looking at and chuckled. Oh, I've got something for us, all right, he teased. Just you wait. Said and done. 3 days later, still with the same grin imprinted on his face, Diego left the apartment for a couple hours to meet with a local friend. When he returned, it was with an even wider smirk, a smile. I guess the word "and" should probably be in there. I'm like blanking on it. It was with an even wider smile and a thick leather-bound tome, cradled in his arms like a newborn pup. The power when the writer and the programmer is also the artist, so they can just keep going. This is some wild art. Thomas didn't say what kind of book it was. Wouldn't even name the author when asked. Said it was some weird Arab name he couldn't pronounce. Then he said, when he walked in with that damn tome, I swear I could see the walls bend and contort to make way to new shades of darkness I never knew existed. This is the answer, Diego had said. The answer to everything we've been looking for. Power and control. Thomas mentioned how Diego's paws rubbed the leather cover with intimate delicacy. He looked terribly eager to open it. You should prepare yourself, he continued. Just give me some time. I swear this will be good. Thomas didn't question it. A few minutes later, he showed up in the bedroom, completely naked and already semi-hard, smiling and panting while Diego's eyes were glued to that book's pages. Uh-huh. Here we go. Diego then got up from the bed, placed the book on the shelf, and was ready to start their game. When he described what happened then, he was very specific to note how the bear seemed to move like a puppet. Like he was hovering. Bloodshot eyes locked on a distant place, that immutable grin of his showing bright rows of sharp teeth. Then it began. Every noise from the outside, be it traffic or neighbors, was snuffed out. Diego's maw opened only a sliver, and from the depths of his throat rose a dissonant chant. Thomas mentioned those damn whispers, somehow coming through between his words. They entered his ears like threads, wrapping tight knots on his brain, and made their spell take effect. The wolf suddenly couldn't move. He couldn't even turn his eyes away, yet there wasn't even a trace of fear. Why would there be? That loss of control was what he'd been wanting all along. The excitement was enough to drown all reason. "On your knees," Diego said. "Make sure to spread those legs for me, pupper." I don't know if he really used that word. Thomas said it sounded like pupper, but also could have been puppet. Anyway, when he heard the command, he said he couldn't even feel it as his knees bent down to the floor tiles. He spread his thighs apart, cock twitching and dripping while he panted. Then he recalled whimpering, practically begging for the next command. "Raise your paw to me," the bear said, and the wolf's arm was lighter than air. "Stretch those fingers," he instructed, and it was as if invisible cords tugged hard on his claw tips. "Now be an obedient pupper and do as I say. Don't hesitate. Don't disobey. Don't even think of disobeying." I'm gonna stop here. This immediately gets really upsetting, so if you're the target audience for where this is going, you're gonna have to check it out yourself, but I know that I cannot keep going on YouTube, so I'm gonna let things stop there and let mature adults make their own decisions going forward. But thanks for watching like always, guys, and like always, you can check out the link in the description to see get caught up on my weekly Let's Tries for other furry visual novels that I've been doing weekly lately for a while now. There's a lot of them. I'll see you guys next time.